All right, mathematicians, now that you know how to use trig ratios, now we're going to use them to solve for a missing side or a missing angle. So when solving for a missing variable in a right triangle isn't special, ask yourself these three questions. What side do we know? What side do we need? What trig ratio do we use? Okay? So there's going to be irrelevant information. Sometimes they're going to give you too much and you're going to have to decide what you need. So first off, if they give you an angle, that's where you start at. So I need to label my sides based off that angle. So first off, this side is going to be opposite, and this side is going to be my hypotenuse. Okay? This side is my adjacent, but notice I know nothing about it. There's no sign there. There's no side length, so I'm going to ignore it. Okay? So then you have to ask yourself, what trig ratio do we use? So what trig ratio deals with hypotenuse and opposite? Okay, sine. So I'm going to be dealing with sine. I need to know the opposite side. Or what side do we know? We know the hypotenuse, sorry. I know the hypotenuse. I'm looking for the opposite, so I know I need to use sine. So how you set this up is you first write your trig ratio, and then you write the angle. So my 50 is going to go in here. So sine of 50 equals, now sine is opposite over adjacent, or opposite over hypotenuse. So I'm going to say x over 20. Okay? So I've got sine of 50 equals x over 20. Okay? I need to solve for x. So what I need to do is you can times by 20 on both sides to get rid of it in the denominator, and times by 20 on the other side. Or you could remember this cool song, x up high, aka x is up high in your ratio. So x up high, cross multiply. Same thing. Because this is the same thing as putting it over 1 and cross multiplying. And I would get x equals sine of 50 times 20. So basically, if you've got a number in the denominator and an x up high in the numerator, you're going to multiply by 20, and we're going to do it in the calculator together. So first off, make sure your mode, you're in degrees. Great. Now I can do the problem. So I'm going to type sine of 50 and times it by 20. And we're pretty much always going to get funky decimals on these. So let's round to the nearest hundredth, because that's what it says right here. So 2 decimal places. So 15.32. So x is going to equal 15.32 inches, because those are my units. Okay, so that is how long this side over here is. It makes sense because it's smaller than the hypotenuse. How cool. Okay, so that is how you use trig ratios to find a missing side. All right, so let's get some more practice in. Example 2. They gave me a degree, which is right here. So first off, I need to label my triangle. This is the hypotenuse, which means this is my opposite side, and therefore that 16 is my adjacent side. Now, they didn't tell me anything about the hypotenuse, so I'm going to ignore it. So I'm going to ask myself what trig function deals with O and A, and that would be tangent, okay? Because tangent is opposite over adjacent. So first off, I'm going to write tangent, and your angle always goes in your parentheses, equals opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to say x over 16, okay? So x is up high. I'm going to cross multiply. So it's the same thing as putting it over 1 and cross multiplying. So x equals tangent of 23 times 16. Okay? So let's type that in the calculator. Tangent 23 times 16. So let's round our answer to the nearest hundredth. So 6.79, that 1 is not going to bump up that 9, so 6.79. So x equals 6.79, and my units were feet this time. Okay, so that makes sense. That side definitely looks smaller than 16. Cool. All right, let's try one more. Actually, it says you try, but I'm totally going to try with you because it's a little bit different. So first off, here is my 65-degree angle. I need to label my sides. So this side is opposite, and that side is my hypotenuse. This side is my adjacent, but I don't know anything about it. So what deals with O and H? That would be sine. And remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. All right, so I'm going to say sine of 65 equals opposite, which is 8, over x. Okay? So notice, how is this different from problems that we've done? My x is not up, my x is not up high. My x is down low. Okay? So if you remember this cool thing, if x is down low, you switch it, you know, which this will make sense in a second when you watch a cool rap video. Not mine. But if x is down low, you're going to switch them. So we're going to switch these two terms. And I'm now going to put x up top. And I'm going to switch sine of 65 and put it on bottom. Okay? The reason that works out, I'm going to move this over here. Let's go. So if I were to solve this mathematically, you're always going to need to multiply by what's in the denominator. Okay? And I would get x times sine of 65 equals 8. To get x by itself, I would need to divide by sine of 65. Divide by sine of 65. And I would get x equals 8 over sine of 65. So that's where it mathematically makes sense. But if you can remember the cool little mnemonic device, x down low, switch it, you know. And then you've got 8 over sine of 65. So again, you can type that in the calculator using the fraction button, green button, y equals enter. I can't do that because my calculator is lame. So I'm going to say 8 divided by sine of 65, and close that parenthesis and close the other one that matches. And you should get 8.827, which would make it 8.83. So x equals 8.83. Are we in feet? We're in feet. Okay. So those are the two options you can encounter. You can have an x up high, cross multiply. You can have an x down low, switch it, you know. Okay. So those are the two options you will run into when solving for a missing side in a right triangle. Okay. Now, let's move on to inverses. Okay. So we use trig inverses to solve for a missing angle. So notice how this problem is different. They did not give me a measurement of a degree. Okay. First off, that should totally be a right angle. So what we have to do, same thing. Here is my angle I'm looking from. And I need to label my sides. So this is going to be my opposite side. And this is my hypotenuse, which means adjacent is right there. I don't know anything about the opposite side. I know adjacent and hypotenuse. So which one deals with A and H? Cosine. Cosine is A over H. So, okay. So, when I'm looking for an angle, I now have to put it in my parentheses because I don't have it. Adjacent is going to be 29 over hypotenuse, which is 80. Now, this looks like something we know how to do. We know the inverse, the opposite of a cosine is a inverse of a cosine, so cosine -1. I'm going to do it to this side as well. Goodbye cosines. So I would get x equals the inverse cosine of 29 over 80. Now just go ahead and leave it as a fraction, and we can type it in. Now it does want me to round to the nearest degree, so I want the nearest whole number. So I'm going to type inverse cosine 29 over 80. and get 68.7, which would round that to 69 degrees. Okay, so make sure you are paying attention to your directions on what to round to. For side length, it might be nearest hundredth. For an angle, it's usually the nearest degree, so the nearest whole number. Okay, so that is how you use the inverse trig functions to find a missing angle. Okay. All right, so why don't you guys try this one, and then go ahead and try this challenge problem. So Pauline is building a fence around her vegetable garden. What is the length of the fence she will need to build? So basically, we know this side of the fence and this side of the fence. So we need to use trig to find this diagonal side, which we can't use Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so try this first one in this challenge problem on your own, and press pause and we'll go over the answer. Number 1, or the you try, the opposite was 1.8, the hypotenuse was 2.3, so I knew that was sine. So you could have said sine of x or sine of theta equals 1.8 over 2.3. So do the inverse sine of that ratio, and you should have gotten 51.5, and it said nearest degree, so make sure you round that to 52 degrees. Okay. All right, now with this challenge problem, the answer was 11.94. Now you've got Pauline building a fence around her vegetable garden. What is the length of fence she will need to build? So basically, you need to know this outside area. You know 5 and you know 2.75. So basically you're looking for the diagonals. So what I did was I drew this little dotted line, which would give me a right triangle. 2 right triangles and a trapezoid. Okay. So I looked at this right triangle, and I said, if this was 1.75, so was this piece in here, as well as this piece, it's the height of the trapezoid. So I did opposite, and I was looking for this diagonal, which was the hypotenuse. So I knew opposite and hypotenuse was sine. So I said sine of 49.4 equals opposite, 1.75, over hypotenuse x. X was down low, so I switch it, you know. And I got this length right here was 2.30, okay? Same thing over here. I wanted to draw a little right triangle in this, so I could do trig. I was given the angle right here, so opposite would be 1.75, because that's the height over here. The diagonal is going to be the hypotenuse. Okay, diagonal is pretty much always going to be the hypotenuse. So I had opposite and hypotenuse, which was same thing, sine. So I did sine of a 68.1 equals 1.75 over x. X was down low, so I had to switch them and divide, and I got 1.89. Okay, now if I mess up there, let me know. Otherwise, this piece was 1.89 and this piece was 2.30. So I added those back to my 2.75 and my 5 meter, and got that I should buy around 12 meters of fence to cover that garden. Okay, so again, that's a challenge problem. Basically, if you can draw a right triangle in something and find length, that's going to be where it's going to get tricky. So let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, you can practice. Thanks for watching. Oh wait, there's a joke. I hope you didn't get out. So it's not even summer and I already have a tan. Ha 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 ha. So how this makes sense? Again, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, when you divide fractions, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal of the bottom one. So make that h over a. So flip that fraction. H's cancel. You're left with O over A, which is tan. So it's not even summer and I already have a tan.